Dinah was a young woman whose life revolved around the quaint little cafe where she worked. Nestled on a quiet street in a small town, the cafe was a haven for locals looking for a moment of peace amid their daily routines. For Dinah, however, it was her entire world. Her days were an unchanging rhythm of brewing coffee, serving customers, and wiping down tables. Dreams of a brighter future flickered faintly in her heart, often overshadowed by the weight of reality. But this day, though it began like any other, was destined to be one that would change everything. The morning had started with the usual tasks: preparing the pastries, setting the tables, and ensuring the coffee machines were ready for the day ahead. Dinah hummed softly as she worked, her voice blending with the soft jazz music playing in the background. She greeted the early risers with a smile, her polite demeanor masking the exhaustion that came from juggling long hours and personal struggles. As the day unfolded, the cafe filled with its usual patrons, a mix of students, professionals, and retirees. The hum of conversation and the clinking of cups created a symphony of normalcy. Dinah moved seamlessly between tables, her apron tied tightly around her waist, her notepad and pen at the ready. Then as the clock approached midday, the cafe's glass door opened with a soft chime. A gust of cool winter air swept in, carrying with it the unmistakable presence of someone extraordinary. Dinah, balancing a tray of cappuccinos, glanced toward the door and froze. Her eyes widened as she recognized the man who had just entered. It was Clint Eastwood. The Clint Eastwood. His iconic silhouette, etched into the collective memory of countless moviegoers, was unmistakable. Even in his later years, he carried himself with a quiet dignity that commanded attention without demanding it. Dressed in a simple coat and scarf, he looked more like an ordinary traveler seeking a moment of respite than a Hollywood legend. Behind him stood a single companion, a man who appeared to be more of a confidant than a bodyguard. Dinah's heart raced. She had grown up watching his films, marveling at his ability to portray characters of unshakable strength and resolve. And now here he was, standing in the doorway of her little cafe as if he belonged. Clint scanned the room with an unhurried gaze, his eyes taking in the warm, inviting atmosphere. He chose a table by the window, its view offering a glimpse of the sleepy street outside. Dinah stood rooted in place, torn between disbelief and a sudden wave of nervousness. She quickly composed herself, setting down the tray she was holding and grabbing her notepad. Taking a deep breath, she approached his table. "Good afternoon," she said, her voice steady despite the butterflies in her stomach. "Welcome to our cafe. What can I get for you?" Clint looked up, his sharp blue-gray eyes meeting hers. Despite his age, his presence was magnetic, his gaze both intense and kind. "I'll have a cup of black coffee," he said in a low, gravelly voice, the kind that carried years of experience and countless stories. "No sugar. And one of those muffins, please." Dinah nodded, scribbling down the order. "Right away," she replied, her professional demeanor masking the excitement bubbling beneath the surface. As she moved toward the counter, her co-workers whispered among themselves, their eyes darting toward Clint's table. The presence of such a legendary figure had electrified the air, and everyone seemed to feel it. Dinah, however, focused on preparing his order with meticulous care. She poured the coffee, ensuring it was brewed to perfection, and selected the best muffin from the tray. Balancing the items on a small tray, she returned to Clint's table. "Here you go," she said, setting the coffee and muffin down gently. "I hope you enjoy." Clint smiled faintly, a gesture that felt both genuine and rare. "Thank you," he said simply, his voice carrying a warmth that contrasted with his often stoic on-screen persona. As Clint began to sip his coffee and take small bites of the muffin, Dinah retreated to the counter, her hands busy but her mind racing. She couldn't help but steal glances at him, curious about what had brought him to their unassuming cafe. He seemed at ease, his attention occasionally drifting to the notebook he had placed on the table. From her vantage point, Dinah noticed him writing something in the notebook. His expression was one of quiet concentration, as if he were capturing a thought or moment that demanded preservation. She wondered if he was working on a new script or perhaps jotting down memories from his storied life. The cafe, usually a backdrop to the humdrum of daily life, now felt like the setting of a remarkable story in the making. Dinah could sense that this encounter, however brief, was one she would carry with her forever. The cafe buzzed with its usual rhythm, but Clint Eastwood's presence cast a magnetic pull that drew every glance. Dinah tried to act natural, yet she found herself unconsciously glancing in his direction. He sat quietly, his weathered hands turning the pages of his notebook, occasionally pausing to sip his coffee. As Clint finished his muffin, Dinah noticed him raise his hand slightly, signaling her attention. Taking a deep breath to calm her nerves, she walked over to his table, her notepad in hand. "Was everything to your liking?" she asked, her voice steady but her heart pounding. Clint looked up, his expression softening into a faint smile. The coffee was perfect, and the muffin, well, let's just say it was worth writing about. Dinah blinked, unsure if he was joking or serious. "Writing about?" she asked cautiously, her curiosity getting the better of her. He tapped the notebook on the table with a finger. "I like to jot down my thoughts when I find something that stands out. This cafe has a charm you don't see much anymore. It's peaceful, and that's worth noting." Dinah felt a swell of pride for her little cafe, though she tried to keep her expression neutral. "Thank you. We do our best to make it a welcoming place." She hesitated for a moment before adding, "If you don't mind me asking, what brings you here?" "It's not every day we get someone like you in our cafe." Clint leaned back slightly in his chair, his eyes scanning the room. "I was passing through town," he said, his voice thoughtful. "Needed a quiet place to stop, and this place caught my eye. Sometimes it's the unplanned stops that leave the biggest impression." Dinah nodded, absorbing his words. There was a weight to them, a quiet wisdom that seemed to come from a life lived fully. "Well, we're glad you chose us," she said sincerely. He looked at her, his gaze steady. "What about you?" he asked, catching her off guard. "Me? You seem like someone who's got her own story. What keeps you here?" Dinah hesitated, unsure how to answer. "I guess it's just where life led me," she said finally. "The cafe's been my world for a long time. I like the people, the routine, but—" she trailed off, not wanting to admit the rest. "But," Clint prompted gently. She glanced around to make sure no one was listening. "Sometimes I wonder if there's more out there for me. Bigger dreams, but it feels far away." Clint studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. When he spoke, his words were measured and deliberate. "Dreams always feel far away at first, but the distance doesn't matter as much as the steps you take toward them." Dinah blinked, his words resonating deeply. It wasn't just advice, it felt like a challenge. Before she could respond, the cafe's door swung open, bringing a gust of cold wind and a pair of new customers. Dinah excused herself to attend to them, but Clint's words lingered in her mind as she went about her work. As the afternoon wore on, Clint remained at his table, occasionally writing in his notebook or observing the world outside the window. Dinah couldn't help but wonder what he was thinking about. Was he reflecting on his storied career, or perhaps planning something new? Finally, as the sun began to dip lower in the sky, Clint stood and approached the counter. Dinah was busy wiping down the espresso machine, but quickly turned to face him. "Thank you for the coffee and the company," he said, sliding a few bills across the counter. Dinah smiled, trying to hide her disappointment that he was leaving. "It was an honor having you here. Safe travels, Mr. Eastwood." He nodded, his eyes glinting with something unreadable. "Take care, Dinah." Her breath caught. She hadn't told him her name. "How did you—" she began, but he was already walking toward the door, his companion trailing behind. As the door closed behind him, Dinah stood frozen in place, her mind racing. How had he known her name? And why did she feel like this wasn't the last she'd see of him? Later that evening, after the cafe had closed and the streets were bathed in the soft glow of streetlights, Dinah sat at one of the tables, replaying the day's events in her mind. She opened her notebook, the same one she used for jotting down ideas and dreams, and began to write. She wrote about the way Clint had carried himself, the weight of his words, and the spark of inspiration he had ignited in her. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to dream of a life beyond the cafe, a life where her passions and talents could lead her to something greater. Unbeknownst to Dinah, a small slip of paper had been left beneath Clint's coffee cup. When she finally noticed it, she unfolded it with trembling hands. Written in neat, deliberate handwriting were the words, "Every journey begins with a single step. Don't wait too long to take yours." Dinah stared at the note, her heart pounding. It wasn't just a message, it was a sign. The cafe felt different the next morning. The warm light streaming through the windows seemed brighter. The hum of the espresso machine sounded richer, and even the gentle clinking of cups carried a new melody. Dinah couldn't shake the lingering sense of significance Clint Eastwood's visit had left behind. His note, safely tucked in the pocket of her apron, felt like a talisman, a small but powerful reminder of possibilities. As she prepared the cafe for another day, Dinah found herself daydreaming. Could she really step beyond the familiar walls of her small-town cafe? What would that even look like? The thought both thrilled and terrified her. The morning rush began as usual, with regulars filling the cozy space. Mr. Holloway ordered his black coffee and blueberry scone, Mrs. Chang lingered over her Earl Grey tea, and the Thompson twins raced to the counter for their favorite muffins. Dinah greeted each customer with her usual warmth, but her mind drifted to Clint's words about taking steps toward dreams. By mid-morning, her best friend and occasional barista, Mia, strolled in. Mia was a whirlwind of energy, her auburn curls bouncing as she set her bag down behind the counter. "You look like you've seen a ghost," Mia teased, tying on her apron. Dinah laughed softly. "Not a ghost, more like a legend." Mia's eyes widened. "Wait, did I miss something? What happened?" Dinah hesitated, then leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Clint Eastwood came in yesterday." Mia froze, her jaw dropping. "The Clint Eastwood? Dirty Harry Clint Eastwood?" Dinah nodded, unable to suppress a grin. "He was here. Sat right over there." She pointed to the corner table by the window. Mia gasped. "And you didn't call me?" "Dinah, this is the kind of thing you text me about immediately." Dinah laughed. "I was too stunned to even think straight. But Mia, he said something to me that I can't stop thinking about." Mia's teasing expression softened into curiosity. "What did he say?" Dinah pulled the note from her pocket and handed it to her friend. Mia read it, her eyes widening further. "Every journey begins with a single step," she read aloud. "Dinah, this is huge. He's basically telling you to go for it." Dinah shrugged, trying to downplay it. "Go for what, though? I don't even know where to start." Mia grabbed her hands, her voice firm. "You've been talking about expanding the cafe for years. Maybe this is the push you need. Start small, add a new menu item, host a special event, something that gets people talking." Dinah considered Mia's words, a spark of excitement flickering in her chest. "Maybe you're right," she said slowly. "It doesn't have to be a giant leap, just a step." The rest of the day passed in a blur, but by closing time, Dinah had a plan forming in her mind. She spent the evening poring over recipe books and brainstorming ideas. If she was going to take a step, she wanted it to be meaningful. The next morning, she announced her idea to Mia. "A poetry night," Mia repeated, her eyebrows shooting up. Dinah nodded. "Think about it. This cafe is all about connection, right? What better way to bring people together than through art and creativity?" Mia grinned. "I love it. Let's do it. But we'll need some serious planning. Flyers, social media posts, maybe even a theme." They spent the next week preparing. Dinah designed flyers with bold, elegant lettering that read, "An evening of words and whimsy, poetry night at the corner cafe." Mia handled the social media posts, sharing photos of the cozy cafe and announcing the event with captions like, "Join us for a night of inspiration and connection." Word spread quickly, and by the night of the event, the cafe was packed. The tables were adorned with flickering candles, and a small stage had been set up near the window. Dinah had even baked a special batch of lemon lavender scones, which sold out before the first poet took the stage. The evening was a resounding success. Locals and newcomers alike shared their poetry, their voices filling the cafe with laughter, tears, and applause. Dinah felt a surge of pride as she watched her little cafe transform into a hub of creativity and community. As the night wound down and the last guest trickled out, Dinah and Mia sat together, exhausted but exhilarated. "That was incredible," Mia said, sipping a cup of chamomile tea. "You did it, Dinah. You took the first step." Dinah smiled, her heart full. I couldn't have done it without you. Mia raised her mug in a toast. To more steps, and maybe even a few leaps. Dinah clinked her mug against Mia's, her thoughts drifting to Clint Eastwood's note. She didn't know if she'd ever see him again, but she felt certain of one thing. His words had changed her. As Dinah locked up the cafe and stepped out into the crisp night air, she paused to look up at the stars. For the first time in a long time, the world felt wide open, full of possibilities, and she was ready to take the next step. The morning after poetry night, Dinah walked into the cafe feeling an exhilarating mix of exhaustion and pride. The event had been a greater success than she ever imagined. The walls of the cafe still seemed to hum with the echoes of laughter, applause, and heartfelt words from the night before. Mia arrived shortly after, her energy as boundless as ever, despite the late hours they'd both pulled. "Dinah," she said, practically bouncing behind the counter, "you're officially a hit. Did you see the post from last night? The whole town is raving about it." Dinah hadn't had time to check social media yet, but she could tell from Mia's excitement that the buzz was real. "Really?" she asked, pulling her phone from her pocket. Mia nodded. "Check it out. People are tagging us, sharing their poems, even asking when the next event is." Dinah opened the cafe's Instagram page and was stunned. Photos and videos from poetry night had been shared dozens of times. Comments flooded the posts. "Such a magical evening. Thank you, Corner Cafe. Dinah, your scones were the highlight of my night. Can't wait for the next one. Please tell me it's soon." Dinah's heart swelled. It wasn't just about the success of the event. It was about the way her small cafe had brought people together. As the morning rush began, Dinah found herself brimming with ideas. If one event could create this much excitement, what else could she do? Cooking classes? Live music? A book club? The possibilities felt endless. By mid-afternoon, Dinah was deep in thought, scribbling notes in her planner, when the cafe door swung open. She looked up and her heart skipped a beat. There he was again, Clint Eastwood. This time he wasn't alone. A younger man, perhaps in his early 30s, followed closely behind him. The resemblance was striking, suggesting he was Clint's son. Dinah quickly composed herself as Clint approached the counter, his familiar, understated smile in place. "Dinah," he said in that gravelly voice, "looks like I missed quite the evening here." Dinah felt her cheeks flush. "It was amazing," she said. "And honestly, it all started with your words." Clint raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "My words?" Dinah nodded, pulling out the note he'd left. She unfolded it carefully and placed it on the counter. Clint read it, then chuckled softly. "Well, I'll be. Didn't realize I had such an impact." The younger man beside him smiled. "Dad's good at that," he said, dropping little nuggets of wisdom and then watching what people do with them. Dinah grinned. "Well, it worked. Poetry night was a huge success, and now I'm thinking about what's next." Clint's eyes sparkled with approval. "Good. Keep thinking. That's how dreams grow." As they ordered their coffee, black for Clint, a cappuccino for his son, Dinah couldn't resist asking the question that had been on her mind since their first encounter. "What brings you back here, Mr. Eastwood?" Clint smiled. "Call me Clint. And as for what brings me back, I was curious. Wanted to see if you'd taken that first step." Dinah's chest tightened with emotion. "I did, and I'm not stopping." Clint nodded as if he'd expected nothing less. "Good. Now let me give you a bit more advice. Don't be afraid to dream big. Sometimes the stars are closer than you think." Dinah tilted her head. "What do you mean?" Clint exchanged a glance with his son, who smiled knowingly. "We're filming a small project not far from here," Clint explained. "Thought it might be fun to feature a local spot in one of the scenes." Dinah's eyes widened. "Are you saying my cafe?" Clint shrugged, a twinkle in his eye. "If you're interested." Mia, who had been eavesdropping from the kitchen, burst into the room, her face a mix of shock and excitement. "Are you kidding me? Of course we're interested." Dinah laughed, her head spinning. "This is unbelievable." Over the next hour, Clint and his son shared more details about the project, a heartfelt indie film Clint was directing. They envisioned a scene set in a charming, small-town cafe. "This place," Clint said, gesturing around the room, "is perfect. It's got soul." Dinah could barely process what was happening. Her cafe, A backdrop in a Clint Eastwood film? It felt like a dream. As they finalized plans, Clint stood and extended his hand. We'll be in touch with the logistics, but for now, just keep doing what you're doing. You've got something special here, Dinah. Dinah shook his hand, her heart pounding. Thank you for everything. Clint's son added, You've inspired him, you know. He's been talking about this place since we left last time. Dinah felt a surge of pride. Well, he's inspired me too. After they left, Dinah and Mia sat in stunned silence. This is happening, Mia whispered. Your cafe is going to be in a movie. Dinah nodded, her mind racing. It's more than that, Mia. It's a chance to show the world what we've built here. Mia grinned. Well then, we'd better get to work. If this place is going to be in a movie, it has to be perfect. Dinah laughed, her excitement bubbling over. Perfect? It already is. As she looked around the cafe, she saw not just the space she'd created, but the dreams it held, the dreams she was finally ready to chase. The days following Clint Eastwood's visit felt like a whirlwind. Dinah's world was suddenly on the fast track, and she had to keep up. The cafe was buzzing with excitement, not only because of the success of Poetry Night, but also because of the unexpected news. Her little cafe was going to be featured in a Clint Eastwood film. The news spread like wildfire. Locals who had always known the cafe as a quiet corner spot now saw it in a different light. People started flocking to see what all the fuss was about. Some had come for the coffee, others for the unique charm that had always defined the cafe, and now for the chance that they might catch a glimpse of Hollywood magic. Dinah had her hands full managing the logistics of the film shoot, which was set to take place in just a few weeks. The crew, led by Clint and his son, had contacted her to finalize the arrangements. They wanted to film in her cafe for a scene set in a small-town coffee shop, and it was a moment Dinah never imagined would be part of her reality. The day of the shoot arrived, and the cafe transformed. The crew had brought in professional lighting, cameras, and all the bells and whistles of a film set. Dinah could barely recognize the place she had worked so hard to build. The small wooden tables and mismatched chairs were now surrounded by cords, lights, and bustling crew members. Mia, as always, was by Dinah's side, helping organize and keep the cafe running smoothly. The customers who had been there for years now looked on with a mix of awe and disbelief. It was a surreal feeling, but one that Dinah embraced wholeheartedly. The film crew arrived early, and Clint, looking as calm and composed as ever, walked into the cafe with his son. He greeted Dinah with a nod and a smile. Ready for the magic? He asked, his voice carrying the weight of years spent in the industry. I'm as ready as I'll ever be, Dinah replied, her hands slightly trembling with excitement. Clint chuckled softly. Don't worry, Dinah. This is going to be an easy one. Just let the space speak for itself. The filming began, and Dinah watched in awe as the scene unfolded. Clint was a master at directing, his quiet authority evident as he guided the actors through their lines. The scene they were filming was simple, yet deeply moving. A father and son having a heartfelt conversation in the cafe. A moment of connection amidst the bustle of life. As the actors delivered their lines, Dinah couldn't help but feel a wave of pride. This was her cafe, her dream, now being immortalized in film. The warmth of the space, the smell of freshly brewed coffee, and the familiar hum of conversation were all being captured on camera. It was when Clint walked over to her, in between takes, that Dinah realized just how much this moment meant. You know, Clint said, his eyes twinkling with a knowing smile, I've seen a lot of cafes in my time, but this one has something special. It's not just the decor or the coffee, it's the soul of the place. That's what I wanted to capture. Dinah was speechless, overwhelmed by the compliment. Thank you, Clint. That means more than you know. Clint gave her a small nod. I think this film is going to surprise a lot of people. It's not just about the story, it's about the people and the places that make it real. And this cafe, well, it's real. The day progressed with more scenes, and Dinah found herself caught in the magic of it all. The film crew moved seamlessly through the cafe, transforming it into a backdrop for an emotional scene, one that would soon be seen by audiences around the world. By the end of the day, the crew had wrapped up the shoot, and Clint and his son approached Dinah once again, this time with a more relaxed demeanor. Well, that's a wrap, Clint said, his voice warm. I have to say, Dinah, this place exceeded my expectations. You're going to make an impression on a lot of people. Dinah smiled, her heart swelling with pride. Thank you, Clint, for everything. I never imagined something like this could happen here. Clint clapped a hand on her shoulder. That's the beauty of it. Sometimes the most unexpected places have the most to offer. Keep dreaming, Dinah. This is just the beginning. As the crew packed up and began to leave, Dinah felt the weight of the moment settle on her. This was a turning point, not just for the cafe, but for her entire life. The film would be released in a few months, but she knew that its impact would be felt long after. Mia, who had been running around all day, finally stopped to catch her breath. Dinah, do you realize what just happened? You're in a Clint Eastwood film. Your cafe is in a Clint Eastwood film. Dinah laughed, her emotions bubbling over. I know. It's surreal. Well, Mia said, grinning, you've officially made it. This is going to change everything. But Dinah, ever humble, shook her head. Number. This is just another step. The cafe's always been about connection, about bringing people together. If this film can do that for a larger audience, then I'll be happy. Mia nodded thoughtfully. You're right, but still, it's huge. The following weeks saw the cafe explode in popularity. Tourists began to visit, seeking out the cafe that had become part of Hollywood lore. But for Dinah, it was never about the fame or the crowds. It was about the community that had supported her from the beginning. As the release of the film drew closer, Dinah began to notice something else. The small town that had always felt like home was changing. People were more connected, more invested in each other's lives. The film had done something magical. It had brought a sense of pride to the community, and Dinah had played a part in it. She had created a space where people felt seen, where they could come together and share their stories. And now her story was being shared with the world. As the months passed, Dinah's Cafe became a symbol of small-town charm and unspoken connection. The Clint Eastwood film, A Moment in Time, was finally released, and as the credits rolled in theaters, people from all over the world were introduced to the humble little cafe tucked away in the heart of the town. The film's success was beyond anyone's expectations. It became a quiet sensation, one of those films that critics love for its depth, simplicity, and the warmth it radiated. The cafe, with its worn tables and mismatched chairs, was celebrated not as a set, but as a character in its own right. The authenticity of the space resonated deeply with audiences, and for Dinah, the recognition was both surreal and humbling. Every morning now, she still brewed the same coffee, served the same pastries, and greeted the same regulars. But now she did so with an added sense of pride. There was a new energy in the cafe, one that came with the fame of the film, but also with the realization that this place she had created had transcended its original purpose. It was no longer just a place for coffee and conversation. It had become a sanctuary for many, a reminder that in the most unexpected corners of the world, real magic could be found. The tourists who now flocked to the cafe brought with them stories from across the globe. Some came because they had seen the film, while others had heard about the cafe from friends. Dinah never grew tired of the stories, the smiles, and the way people's eyes lit up when they walked through the door. She had always loved the diversity of humanity, and now more than ever, the cafe was a reflection of that. One afternoon, as Dinah was wiping down a table, she spotted a familiar face, Mia. Her best friend had been with her from the very beginning, and today she looked different. There was a new lightness in her step, as though the success of the cafe had infused her with a renewed sense of purpose. Mia, Dinah said with a smile, what's going on with you today? You look like you've got something on your mind. Mia grinned, her eyes sparkling. I do. Actually, I've been thinking about something for a while now. You know how you always wanted to expand? Maybe take the cafe to other places? Share your story with more people? Dinah raised an eyebrow. Mia, I thought we agreed this was a one-cafe operation. I'm not sure I'm ready to change that. Mia shrugged, her grin widening. Well, I've been talking to some people, and I think it's time. The world needs more of what you've created here. You've done something no one else has been able to do. This cafe, your vision, it's bigger than this little town. It's bigger than just us. Dinah took a deep breath. the weight of Mia's words sinking in. I never thought about expanding, honestly. I've always believed in the importance of staying true to one's roots. But maybe you're right. Maybe it's time to share this with the world in a bigger way. Mia sat down beside her, her expression serious. You've built something special here, Dinah. Something real. This cafe isn't just about coffee. It's about community, connection, and the power of a simple moment. People need to experience that, and it wouldn't be the same if you didn't share it. Dinah's mind raced as the possibilities opened up before her. She thought about the film, about the way it had captured the essence of the cafe. It wasn't just about the coffee. It was about the stories shared over cups, the friendships forged in the cozy corners, and the quiet moments of reflection that only a special place like this could offer. But the thought of expanding, of changing the very essence of what had made the cafe so special, was daunting. She had poured her heart into this space, and the idea of altering that felt almost impossible. Yet as Dinah stood at the counter, she couldn't ignore the growing sense that the next chapter of her story was about to unfold. The world was waiting for what she had to offer, and she couldn't keep it to herself forever. In the following weeks, Dinah had long conversations with Mia and a few trusted friends. She weighed the pros and cons of branching out, of opening more locations. But she knew in her heart that the cafe's soul, its authenticity, its warmth, could not be replicated unless she remained true to what it represented. The cafe was a reflection of her own journey, and she realized that sharing that with the world in a way that felt right was the next step. She reached out to a few close people who had supported her all along, including her loyal regulars, to gauge their thoughts. The overwhelming response was that they saw what Mia had seen. The cafe was more than just a business. It was a movement built on connection, understanding, and the beauty of taking a moment to pause in a busy world. The decision to expand wasn't easy, but it was inevitable. With Mia's help, Dinah began putting plans in motion. They decided that the best way to stay true to the cafe's roots was to create a franchise model that would allow each new location to embody the same spirit of community and connection. The new locations would never simply be cafes. They would be hubs for people to gather, share stories, and find comfort in a world that often moved too fast. Each cafe would reflect the unique character of its community, just as the original cafe had, but with the same warmth and authenticity. Months later, Dinah stood in the original cafe, watching as the first new location of her cafe chain was being built. The familiar hum of activity was now accompanied by the excitement of a dream turned reality. It was a full circle moment, one she had never anticipated, but one she knew was meant to be. As the first new cafe opened its doors in a nearby town, Dinah was there to greet the customers, to see the same magic she had found in her original cafe spread to a new place. People gathered, just as they always had, and Dinah felt the same sense of peace she had felt all those years ago when she first opened the cafe. It wasn't about the number of locations or the success of the business. It was about what the cafe represented: connection, comfort, and the power of taking a moment to breathe. Clint Eastwood's words echoed in her mind. Sometimes the most unexpected places have the most to offer. And now Dinah knew that the world was ready for the magic that had started in a small cafe in a small town. The cafe had come full circle, and so had Dinah.